Würden die Menschen unser Geldsystem verstehen, hätten wir eine Revolution, und zwar noch vor morgen früh. So das berühmte Zitat von Henry Ford. Und wie ihr wisst, ist es mir seit Anbeginn dieses Kanals, aber auch in all meinen Büchern immer eine Herzensangelegenheit gewesen, das Geldsystem verständlich runterzubrechen, zu übersetzen, so, damit du weißt, wie du dich verhalten musst. Weil das Grundübel aller Krisen, die wir momentan erleben, ist tatsächlich unser Fiat-Geldsystem. Nicht umsonst heißt es im Englischen Follow the Money, beziehungsweise Geld regiert die Welt. Aus dem Grund bin ich heute besonders glücklich und stolz, erstmalig auf einem deutschen YouTube-Kanal einen ganz besonderen Gast einladen zu dürfen, nämlich niemand anderen als den Buchautoren und Ökonomen Saifedean Ammous. Auch er hat in einem legendären Buch das Geldsystem näher erklärt. Und ich kann es nur jedem ans Herz legen, dieses Buch zu lesen, nämlich der Bitcoin Standard. Sein neuestes Buch ist soeben ebenfalls in deutscher Übersetzung erschienen, der Fiat-Standard. Beide Bücher findet ihr unten verlinkt und könnt ihr direkt beim Verlag bestellen. In diesem atemberaubenden Interview machen wir einen Deep Dive in das Geldsystem. Was ist Geld? Warum leben wir eigentlich in einem riesen Betrugssystem? Und warum ist Bitcoin so wichtig? Schnallt euch an, teilt das Video kräftig. Wenn ihr neu im Kanal seid, wenn ihr zum ersten Mal hier seid, freut mich natürlich riesig, wenn ihr ein Abo dalasst und die Glocke aktiviert, damit ihr immer ganz schnell informiert werden könnt, sobald ein neues Video erscheint. Schaut auch mal in die Playlist, auch da gibt's viele tolle Interviews mit weltweit kompetenten Interviewpartnern. Es gibt Videos zum Geldsystem, zu Notenbanken, Inflation, aber natürlich auch Bitcoin und Rohstoffen. Also einfach mal durchstöbern, da ist für jeden was dabei. Und wenn euch das Video gefällt, dann Daumen nach oben, teilt es kräftig mit Freunden und Bekannten. Und jetzt geht's los, schnallt euch an in einem wirklich, wie ich finde, tiefen und guten Gespräch mit Saifedean. Und ich habe es ein paar Mal jetzt auch angeschaut, ich habe immer noch Gänsehaut, wie ihr seht. Und wie gesagt, ich bin unendlich dankbar und demütig, dass Saifedean erstmalig bei mir in Deutschland aufgetreten ist. Und am Ende des Interviews werde ich wie gewohnt eine Zusammenfassung für euch ans Video dranhängen. Und jetzt geht's los, viel Spaß! Welcome to a new episode, Deep Dive, today with Saifedean Ammous. Saifedean, nice having you on my show.
Pleasure talking to you, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, after all this time, we tried it already last year, but you were really busy with all your projects, with your online course, with your book. And yeah, you are a revolutionary and very controversial thinker in terms of money, civilization, and Bitcoin. You're an Austrian economist, you're an anarchist, and author of the legendary book, The Bitcoin Standard. I've got here the German edition. It's very good. I put the link for the book in the show notes, of course. But right now, you wrote a new book, and this is called the Fiat-Standard, and it just got published in German as well. And I have to recommend it already to all my audience, to all of you who are watching, because it's again a masterpiece, I have to say, and that's what we're talking today. So let's start with money, Saifedean, and with a famous quote from Henry Ford, who said, "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking or monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." Do you agree?
I think so, and I think, Bitcoin kind of obviates the need for people to understand it. That's the kind of beautiful thing about it, is that it's, people don't need to understand the refrigerator in order to use it. They don't need to understand the how the incubator that saves their preterm child works and why it works. They just put their kids in it and their kids survive because of it. This is how technology functions. And the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that it has freed us from having to explain to people to make them understand what's going on in order to make this happen. And this is kind of not very smart of me to say, as somebody who earns their living in explaining it. The good thing about Bitcoin ultimately is that it doesn't matter if people understand what's really going on. They're going to act on it based out of their self-interest. And so during the time of Ford in the Fiat era, people still believed in the kind of political path of fixing things. And Bitcoin is just an entirely different way of fixing a very serious political problem by finding a technological solution. And that's what's happening, I think.
Okay, so let's get a step back. So what is money actually? Because most people handle money every day, but nobody knows how is it working? How does it come into the world, and what is it actually? So let's start with the definition of what is money.
Yeah, money is the term used to identify the common and most commonly accepted medium of exchange.
Yeah.
Medium of exchange is a specific function. Money is not a very clear-cut definition. There's no very clear definition of what is money, because the term is relative. You know, when you say general medium of exchange, it depends, general when and where and to who. But medium of exchange is a precise definition. A medium of exchange is anything that you acquire in order to pass on and exchange with something else later on. It's a good that you don't acquire for its own sake because you want to own it for some reason. And it's not a good that you acquire for the sake of producing other goods. It's not a capital good. So it's not a machine that you buy in order to make things. It's not an investment good. It's not a consumption good, and it's not an investment good. It's money. It's an exchange good. It's a third different kind of good. You don't buy it for its own sake. You don't benefit from owning it for its own sake. You benefit from exchanging it on later on. That's the function of money. That's what money does, basically. And anything can be used as a medium of exchange. Anything can really be used as a medium of exchange. There's nothing to stop you from using bananas as your medium of exchange if you want. However, you know, just like with anything, you can call anything a car, you can call anything a rocket ship. Things that would end up working according to the function of rocket ship or car or money as we understand it are the things that are best suited for it. And that means things that hold on to their value well, so that when you are able to exchange them, you don't lose much. And that's, I think, the starting point of the Bitcoin standard, is understanding that the choice of what determines money is what is the hardest thing to produce. And I go through historical examples going back to seashells and limestones and copper, silver, gold, and then even government money. Even within government money, we see the same relationship happen, that the government currencies that have a low supply growth rate maintain a relatively large amount of value in them, whereas the currencies that grow at a very fast rate decline in value and collapse and become less significant as forms of money. So we see this relationship all across, and that's kind of the central thesis of the Bitcoin Standard. And the first 7 chapters of the Bitcoin Standard don't even discuss Bitcoin. But they go over all this in order to arrive at the conclusion, at the thesis that I want to make about Bitcoin, which is that Bitcoin is the hardest money ever invented. It's going to become the hardest money. And because it's going to become the hardest money, I think it's an enormously important technology with enormous civilizational, societal, and political implications.
Mm-hmm. So when did you discover Bitcoin, or when did you realize, oh my God, this is a thing, or this is the only solution we have in our world?
Unfortunately, Bitcoin, people generally expect hear about me after having studied Bitcoin, but there's behind this Saifedean, there was an idiot, no-coiner, Saifedean, who heard about Bitcoin pretty early, but kept on ignoring it and dismissing it and laughing at it. Not really laughing at it, but ignoring it and dismissing it and not understanding it. The key mistake was in forming an opinion on it before studying it. And that was me basically up until about 2013, 2014 is when I really started to pay attention to it and understand what was really going on. Before then, I have to say, my understanding of what Bitcoin was that it was similar to what shitcoins are today, and that it's a group of people who are running a currency. And good luck, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I don't want to get arrested. I don't want to be caught with it, and I don't have high expectations about what's going to happen to you. In 2013 and 14, when it became clear to me that that this is different, that there's an actual mining process going on. There's no easy way for people in this committee to just make more of this coin to hand out. They are actually mining it, and there's a serious cost to mining it, and that's the only way people can find in order to make more Bitcoin. And this is the supply, and this is how the supply is fixed, and nobody has managed to change it so far. And that the owner is not there, and that I thought it would be shut down by government when something like Silk Road happened, and then something like Silk Road happened and it wasn't shut down by the government. And I thought, well, why, how, let's start looking into it. And that's when, that's when the smartass learns to shut up. The idiot smartass inside you learns to shut up, and you actually go and read with an open mind to understand what is actually going on. How does this thing actually work? And then you go down the rabbit hole, and then here you are.
And that's when you decided to write a book about a Bitcoin standard, and it's a legendary book actually. It
was still like a few years later. Like initially, even in 2013 and 14 and 15, like I got it, but I was learning more and more about it. And I was still going down the rabbit hole and still learning a lot. And I think, really, I only came to really sort of think. The idea of writing the book only came to me in 2017. Before then, it seemed I didn't quite understand it enough to do this. And 2017 is really when I thought, I'm arguing with people on Facebook and Twitter all day, trying to explain this thing to them. And well, it wasn't me who thought this, incidentally. It was my wife who thought this and said, instead of just arguing with all of those people on Facebook, why don't you actually write something?
Yeah.
I thought, that's a good idea. And so I stopped arguing on Facebook, and I wrote 1,000 words a day for about 2.5 months. And then that was the bulk of the book. And then I spent another few months writing and editing it and researching more and getting feedback from people. And then it was published in early 2018.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said it's the hardest money we ever had. Other Austrian economists say gold is the hardest money we've ever seen. So what's your take on gold? And isn't it that all Austrian economists have to fall actually for Bitcoin because it's so Austrian?
I think so. if you think about it in terms of the numbers, it's not entirely clear, because with gold we don't really have very clear numbers about what is the
stock to flow, or
what is the stock to flow, what is the supply, and what is the supply percentage growth rate. But they're around the same today. We can, with a certain margin of error, we can say that gold is around 1.8 to 2 to 2.5%, between 1.5 to 2.5%. And we know Bitcoin is around 1.8% this year, roughly. We still can't be sure exactly what it is going to be, but it's going to be around 1.8% of the year, for the year. But in 4 years' time, the gold is likely to be exactly where it is, close to where it still is, whereas Bitcoin is definitely going to be at half of where it is right now. In a few years, it's going to become harder money. So I think the question is, for Austrian economists, and this is the thing that I think honest Austrian economists like, say, Joe Salerno get, whereas somebody who's financially invested in not Bitcoin, in gold, like Peter Schiff, can't seem to understand, is that what matters are the monetary properties, and what makes something money. And this is what Salerno says in his book on sound money, is what makes something sound money is the fact that it is money that is chosen by people freely on the market. That's it. There's no chemical formula that says that money has to be made out of gold or has to be made out of silver. Certain places and times, people have used copper, people have used silver, people have used gold, people have used agricultural commodities, people have used all kinds of things as money. And there's nothing physically inherent to a good that needs to be used as money. In other words, those physical things just serve a cognitive function for us, which is that we use this as a unit of money. We think of this piece of gold as a unit of money, but really, the value is in our minds. So that value can, just because we use a physical object in order to denote the value, we could use a digital object in order to denote the value. In fact, this is what we've been using for the last century. Realistically, even though the monetary system currently in a sense, is still based off gold and still based off banks that holds gold, the money that is moving around is digital. And even though there's some physical money around, 95% of what's money is digital in the US and in the world. Well, in the world it's maybe a little bit lower, but the vast majority of money is digital money. And so therefore, there is no reason why digital technology can't serve the function of money. It already is. And now we're just introducing it at the base layer. Instead of having a physical thing moving around and then having digital records of that physical thing on top of it, we now just have purely native digital records. So I think Austrians can understand why that would gain value on the market and why it would function as a role of a medium of exchange, why people would use it as a medium of exchange and as a store of value, and why over time it would gain value, and why it would likely grow in adoption over time. And I think it makes no sense to fixate on the physical properties of gold, because these are not what make it money. So I would expect more and more people who lean toward Austrian economics to see the good side of Bitcoin over time.
So we see a lot of economists from the other side, like Paul Krugman and so on. Why they don't get it, or what's the problem? Are they narrow-minded? Are they dumb or just ignorant? Or is it like a hybrid?
It's self-interest. It's rational self-interest to a very large extent. I mean, you have to understand that the entire economics professional establishment, everything from universities to central banks to mainstream media, all of these people come from institutions that are financed by central banks, by fiat money printing, and banks, of course, I should mention. So whether it's in the banking sector, whether it's in the academic sector, which is effectively the PR arm of the banking sector and the central banking sector. So if you're an economist today, if you're a mainstream fiat economist, where do you get your paycheck from? You get your paycheck from an institution that is getting its paychecks from the fiat money printer. So there's no escaping this. These institutions, everything that they teach, everything they think about economics is contingent on their intellectual allegiance to the official line of inflation good, GDP number go up good, and we need to pump up credit and pump up more inflation in order to make the economy good. And let's go ahead with it. I mean, this is kind of the unquestionable assumption of fiat finance is that you have to fiat economics is that the role of the government in managing the economy and in managing the interest rate, and you just can't get anywhere if you question the entire premise. If you say, hey, why should we have a central planning board for banking? Why can't banking be a business like all others? Why can't we have a free market in money? Why shouldn't people get the chance to compete in the currencies that they want to use? And the answer is they're paid to work for this agency. And so they cannot entertain this idea that something is an alternative. This is why they're so bitter and angry about Bitcoin, because it puts them and all of their nonsense out of business. You have opinions about what the interest rate should be? Good for you. Go write a book or write a blog post or tweet about it, but you don't get to manage everybody's money anymore. People can choose to opt out of your stupid Keynesian theories of money management. And it's and I think the implications are really far-reaching. It's true on the sense of, first of all, in the central banks. So central banks don't want to lose power. So all central bank economists see it as just anathema. It's just insane. What is this crazy, dangerous invention, And then on the level of academia, it's the same thing. The whole point of academia is to promote central banking propaganda. And so then you come and tell them we're going to put central banks out of business. How are we going to teach macro? And how are we going to get paid for teaching stupid macro theories and Keynes? So of course this nonsense makes no sense. Then, of course, you have the private sector banking industry, or the nominally private sector of the fiat governmental banking welfare industry. And in the fiat welfare of the banking industry, the entire business model, the entire reason that we have such an enormous number of people who work in this giant Ponzi-tron that is the fiat economy. Why do we need so many people out there, making important business banking things and moving money around? It's because it all rests on credit creation, and it all rests on an economy that's built on credit and built on money generation. So every business model degenerates, as I argue in the Fiat-Standard, which explains how fiat works. So you really understand, if you think about the fiat as a technology, and that's really the point of the Fiat-Standard, in the same way that I explain Bitcoin from first principles, I explain fiat from first principles, why fiat comes about and what it does and what it's good for. And you realize the way that fiat is mined is through lending. Fiat loans, when you make a new loan in fiat money, new fiat money is made. And so it's replaced gold mining with credit creation, but it creates a lot more credit as a percentage of GDP than gold used to create. And so we're constantly inflating, and so we're constantly moving everybody into this financial industry. And so every business wants to be in debt. This is why your local supermarket wants to become your banker and wants to offer you a credit card. And this is why your local clothes shop wants to get into a lending relationship with you, where they offer you 6 months of free interest rate, and then they start charging you 20%, because they can borrow at 3% or 5%, and they can lend you at 20%. So or 30%. And so everybody devolves into this business model. And so you come and you tell those people, yep, we're going to go back to a monetary system that's built on hard money. And they immediately shriek, no, but what about my credit creation? Like, exactly. You need to shut the fuck up and go and get a useful job, making useful things for others. And so obviously that doesn't fly very well. So they get really butthurt about Bitcoin. Whoops. Maybe we shouldn't say that.
It's okay. In Germany you can say everything. Don't worry. No beep.
All right. So that doesn't go over very well. So they get pretty upset about Bitcoin as well. So you have the banking industry. And then, of course, the other aspect of it is that because you don't have this constant treadmill of inflation where everybody's on this hamster wheel where they need to keep running in order to stay put, where you need to take your money to the gambling Ponzi-tron of the fiat casino in order to try and beat inflation, because you can't just hold on to your money because your money is a melting ice cube. So you have to go to the fiat markets, and you have to invest in extremely sophisticated things that would take you an entire professional career to understand. And even people who take an entire professional career to understand still can't really beat inflation regularly on the long run. So if you think about it, your average fund manager, your average Wall Street thought leader, all of these people, with very strong opinions about what's going on in fiat markets and what you should do with your money and what you shouldn't do with your money. Can any of them beat fiat inflation regularly with over 10, 20, 30 years? I mean, there's a few who managed to do this, and given the number of the ones that have been trying, you're bound to come up with a few. There's bound to be a few lottery winners who happen to pick the right things. But overall, the real inflation rate, which is, the actual devaluation of the supply of the dollar, if you want to think about it in terms of the increase of the dollar, is happening at a rate regularly over the last 60 years of an average of 7%. So the money's being devalued around 7-8%, just the US dollar, over the last 60 years. And that's ignoring the last couple of years of insanity, 2020 and 2021, just, up until even before the corona hysteria. So we're doing 7% per year. So are you able to beat 7% in dollars per year over 60 years? I mean, there's nobody who can do it over a 60-year lifetime, because, maybe you'll be able to do it for a few years when you have a startup, or when you get into the beginning of your career where your earnings go up a lot and you have a lot of understanding of your sector of the economy, so you know how to invest and you can make a lot of money in it. But eventually, you're going to want to spend some of that money and stop obsessing over the markets. And it's just not realistic for most people. You have to become a full-time asset manager in order to just keep the money that you already earned. So whatever your job is, you need to be out there being a asset manager, or, of course, the other thing is hiring an asset manager. And that brings us to the other massive reason for Bitcoin derangement syndrome, which is that Bitcoin puts a lot of this money management industry out of business because it gives people back the ability to save for the future without having to take enormous amounts of risks. And that's what fiat takes away, which I discuss at depth in the Fiat-Standard. Because the money loses value, people can't save, and so people don't have an easy way of saving. But people, no matter how rich, would like to have a big chunk of their portfolio in liquid savings, money that they can access at any point in time, that they would see grow in value over time, or at least not lose value over time, and not witness hyperinflation and not get stolen by fraudulent banks. And Bitcoin just allows anybody to have that all over the world. And it's an enormously powerful tool. It's an enormously powerful tool for people who want to save for the future. And therefore, it's an enormously disruptive thing of the money management industry. So that's why they get really upset about it. So that's why I think this is my kind of cynical, no-nonsense take at why people get so emotional about Bitcoin. But I should just add that I fully support everybody's right to be angry at Bitcoin. And I strongly encourage everybody who is angry at Bitcoin to continue not buying Bitcoin, to teach us Bitcoiners a lesson. Please, your boycotts, yes, keep boycotting Bitcoin, because that will show us. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, you describe in your book, actually, you compare fiat with Bitcoin and how it works. Like it's a central shitcoin, and the central banks all over the world are like side chains which create their own shitcoin. I like that a lot. So perhaps you want to mention something to this topic as well.
Yeah, I think the idea for the book came to me after I saw a talk by Giacomo Zucco in Riga, where he was trying to make the Steelman case for at Baltic Honey Badger. He was trying to make the Steelman case for altcoins. And he tried to make the best case for altcoins. So I thought, what would happen if we tried to study fiat as an altcoin? And ultimately, fiat is software. I mean, people think of the physical US dollar bill, but physical US dollars are less than 10% of the money supply, maybe less than 3% at this point. So it is software. It's digits. It's zeros and ones traveling around computers, showing up on your phone, showing up in your bank account, but they're really just traveling all over the world. And so it's all digital. So let's think about how this software actually works. And it's a lot more sophisticated and complicated than Bitcoin software. It's a lot more primitive. It has a lot of manual inputs and a lot of manual oversight. And really, it makes sense when you think about it as just a manual, less advanced form of Bitcoin. It's like an abacus next to a computer, which is Bitcoin. And so how does this thing work? Well, really, think about the Bitcoin payment network and analogize it to the fiat payment network. And think about the Bitcoin supply and analogize it to the fiat supply. So I mentioned Bitcoin mining. I mentioned fiat mining as lending. Another way to think about it is how the fiat network operates payments is, if you think about if you think about international payments on the SWIFT network, the international payments go from individuals in their own bank through their central bank to the other central bank to the bank. And so the settlement and clearance happens between central banks. Everything ultimately is centralized through the Federal Reserve. So effectively, the only equivalent to a full node, if you know Bitcoin, you know what a full node is. The only equivalent to a full node in fiat is the US Federal Reserve, effectively. It's the only full node, because as we saw, which, I wrote this before the recent Russia-Ukraine war, but as we saw after the Russia-Ukraine war, an entire section of the network just gets taken out. Russia, 100 plus million people, get taken out of the network, and they can't function on SWIFT, and their balances get confiscated when political problems happen. So this is a purely political network, effectively. Well, it's not purely political, obviously, but there is, at its highest level, it is political. There's one central node, and effectively, the only way to play in this network is to be friends with a central node. Whereas with Bitcoin, obviously, we have a decentralized system where it doesn't matter what anybody else on the network thinks. You just use your own node, and if you have your own private keys, nobody can stop you from spending on the network. Nobody can kick you out. So I think this is extremely helpful when you think about it in these terms, because ultimately, we use fiat. We live in a world of fiat. We swim in it like fish in water. And Bitcoin is our way to get out of this water and see what life is like outside. So then you can really take a different perspective on how things are. So I think, the fiat network as being centralized is extremely powerful in understanding it politically. Fiat money creation, I think, is extremely important. When you think about it in the Bitcoin network, the difficulty of creating Bitcoin continues to go up to ensure that the supply goes up at a declining rate. With gold, the stockpile of gold continues to increase to ensure that the new production is always a small fraction of the existing stockpile. But with fiat, credit creation with fiat can increase very quickly. The one thing that restrains growth in fiat, that prevents hyperinflation from being very common, is that the equivalent of difficulty adjustment in the fiat network is that credit creation is self-correcting. This is, I think, an important thing you get from Austrian business cycle theory, which is that credit creation itself sows the seed of its own destruction. So governments will create credit in order to revive the economy, so they will hand out too many loans to people. So too many people start too many projects that can't all be profitable, because the only reason they all think they are going to be profitable is that they're calculating based on old prices before the government increased the money supply. So when you increase the money supply, prices go up, they stop being profitable. So a lot of those businesses go out of business. And then what happens when they go out of business is the money supply goes back to declining. Yeah. You have deflationary crisis. So you have this inflationary credit expansion that causes a boom that's always unsustainable and ends with a crash, which causes a deflationary crash in the money supply. So you have this kind of oscillation in the money supply that prevents it from increasing too drastically, which is why they manage a relatively benign 7-8% in most sane economies. Most good currencies, this is what they do. Well, 7, 8, 9, 10 in like most the US, Canada, Europe, and Japan, Britain. This is generally what they do over the past 60 years. But they average that because they do get these deflationary recessions where money supply contracts significantly and allows the money supply to reset a little bit. So I think it's extremely useful to think about it this way. And then the implications of understanding that your entire monetary system, think about it as a form of software. Imagine we ran Bitcoin, and then one day, after the whole world is running on a Bitcoin network, some guy figures out an exploit. I know this is ridiculous, but for the thought experiment, some guy figures out an exploit that makes Bitcoin entirely centralized so that they can decide every single transaction and they can confiscate every balance. And we go back to a completely centralized version of Bitcoin. Now imagine how much power that person would have on everything. They could go to anything in society and basically shut it down if he doesn't like it. And he can make their entire financial existence reliant and dependent on them fulfilling criteria for him. So this is what allows government to have such an important implication, such an important amount of power in society. So the second part of the book says, all right, if we install this software on society, let's take a normal human society, normal healthy human society, like say the world in the end of the 19th century, monetarily at least, where they have working gold standard. We go and install a form of software where a small group of people and banks and central banks are able to decide everything for everybody in the world and force them to go along, or they take away those people's ability to have money, this foundationally important part of human technology, without which human civilization is not possible. Imagine if we installed this kind of system, how much influence are those people going to have on society, A, and B, and this is the two important things, how much is this going to cost in terms of the devaluation of the currency? And what are the implications of that on society economically? And when you tie those two things together, the entire fiat scam, the way that the fiat shitcoin works is to try and distract you from seeing the association between those two things. But the reason they can control everything in your life is because they are devaluing their money, making everything more expensive for you. And the reason they continue to tell you that everything that is expensive is not good for you, and that everything that is cheap, which is obviously shit for you and you shouldn't do, is actually good for you. The reason they're always telling you it is good for you to take cheap things is because they want you to be on the cheap things to hide the effects of their inflation. And that's what we look at in part 2. So in part 2, Fiat Life of the book, we look at a society that runs on this software. We look at what happens to the food market.
Yeah, horrible.
Yeah, on the one hand, you have the value of money going down, so people can afford less and less food. And that's, of course, extremely politically unpopular, so no president wants to be in charge when their people are going hungry. And then on the other hand, the government has enormous amounts of money to be able to tell people all kinds of stupid bullshit. So how does this work out? Guess what? The government continues to devalue the currency, and the government continues to tell people that they need to eat garbage, basically. They need to eat industrial waste. They need to eat cheap industrial waste, engine oil, replace the fats that all your ancestors, thousands of generations, have eaten the same fat from animals, all of them. This is why you're here. Replace that with engine lubricant. Take that, take the highly processed industrial waste from the production of horrible industrial material and make that your fat. It's better for you. It's better for inflation, for CPI, and it's also better for you because the science says so. And who is this science? Oh, yeah, the science that's funded by the same agency that prints that money, that is causing the price of real fat to go up. Interesting coincidence, huh? And the same thing happens with energy. And I think it's the same thing. You've had 50 years of hysterical nutrition science trying to tell people to stay away from meat because meat is expensive and to instead eat industrial waste and induced sugar and sugar and grains and all of these things that can be made at a very high scale industrially and that have a lot of calories and are filling but not enough nutrition and that are extremely destructive to human health. They keep promoting that at the expense of healthy meat that people need to eat. Similarly, they keep with energy, they keep doing the same thing, which is they keep telling people that no, you shouldn't consume oil, you shouldn't consume electricity. It's not good that we're consuming so many resources. We need to consume less. We need to consume less to save the planet because, we're going to boil the oceans.
We live in an inflationary world, but they pray and tell us that we should use less, like in a deflation. Don't go for vacation, drive less with your car, don't eat too much. It's insane, actually.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. The same exact idiots who tell you that we need inflations for people to consume will also tell you that we need you to consume less because of science saying certain things about CO2 destroying the planet or something like that. It's insane.
It's a fiat world. It's fiat science, like you already said. It's fiat politics. It's fiat. It's everywhere. It's everywhere a scam, a Ponzi scheme.
It is. It's insanely amazing how this continues. It is the secret. This is the kind of really controversial point that I try and make in the Fiat Standard, is that the reason that the Fiat Standard continues to survive, the reason people are able to put up with 7-8%, is because the 7-8% is reflected in lower living standards that people have internalized and accepted as just a normal part of scientific progress, because science says we need to go cold this winter, so it's okay. We're gonna freeze to death this winter, and it's good for GDP. It's fine. We don't want the inflation numbers to go up too much. They've internalized it as this normal thing, but really, it's impoverishment at a time when human living standards had been going up for more than a century and a half. From the beginning of the 19th century, human living standards had been going up enormously on the gold standard, and they continued to go up until the 1970s. Because effectively we still sort of were on a gold standard with some degree of restraint on government printing. But then in the 1970s, you see, according to so many measures of human progress, everything takes a nosedive. And one of these is the saving rates, for instance, which begin to decline a lot in these countries. And you see inflation go up. And you see the quality of food decline. You see industrial food goes up. You see meat declines and is taken over by, people start eating more chicken and more processed meat rather than red meat. And you see more and much more of these horrific fats, the seed oils, which are extremely cheap and very popular with governments all over the world who subsidize them all over the world. So this stuff is heavily subsidized because you can get people to think that they are eating with this neat industrial trick, get engine lubricant and put it with mass-produced cattle feed, which is grains, and then add some flavorings and some color and wrap it up in some colorful plastic, and people think they've had food. It's an incredible...
And they get fat and they get sick, and then we see the Fiat pharma industry, which gets richer than ever, and it's horrible.
Exactly.
Actually.
It's a fake, it's an entirely fiat world. I mean, it's fiat at every level. Government decides that that your money should be devalued. Government decides that you shouldn't eat the food that all your thousands of generations of ancestors have eaten, and that you should eat industrial waste. Government decides that you shouldn't drive gasoline cars anyway. You should get this glorified golf cart. You should stay in this tiny little pod. You shouldn't stay in a big house. Let's make energy expensive so everybody moves into tiny little pods in the city because it's cheaper to heat the pod. And so they make all those decisions by fiat, and then by fiat, they also legislate who are the people who are allowed to treat you from these conditions. You're only allowed to go to their doctors to get their drugs. And then if you try and go to another doctor, you could end up in jail, and they could end up in jail because, you're practicing pseudoscience. So it's a monopoly across the way, and you're just continuously being milked according to who manages to get government fiat on their side at every step in your life. And, as long as you keep GDP number going up and you keep CPI number going up, both of which are numbers produced by the government itself, how convenient, then people are just going along and nodding. And of course, there's an enormous amount of technological progress that's happening in spite of all of this. But the really pernicious thing that the Keynesians and these people have managed to pull off is to try and pretend as if the increases in productivity that are afforded to us by industrialization, by modern technology, most of which was invented under the gold standard and would continue to evolve over the last century, they act as if this stuff is happening because of fiat. That, the reason that people are inventing important things is because their central bank is making them poorer. If their central bank was allowing them to accumulate capital, then they wouldn't invent anything. It's, of course, stupid nonsense. You look at the 19th century under the gold standard, everything was invented in the 19th century. The airplane, the car, the telegraph, the computer, pretty much everything was invented at that time. The elevator, the subway, so many things, so many of the world's most important medical, technological, and agricultural inventions were made back then. And it all happened under the gold standard. The idea that somehow people are only able to be inventive and innovative if they're continuously robbed is something only somebody who is benefiting from that robbery could believe.
So should we go back to the gold standard?
I mean, I wouldn't mind it. I think it would be a great thing for governments to go on a gold standard at this point. But I think a Bitcoin standard is probably preferable.
Better. better. Yeah, but they will never allow this. But anyhow, we both have to admit that fiat actually works. It's all over the world. 7 billion people use it every day.
Yes.
And it's still around us, even when we both think it should disappear immediately. But it's still around, and it works. Actually, we have to admit it.
Yeah, and at a certain point, horse-drawn carriages worked. It still meant everybody had to spend half their day dealing with horse shit, but it still effectively worked. Now, whether that means you're going to keep taking a horse carriage around your town forever is a different question. It works just because it works doesn't mean it'll work forever. Typewriters worked at a certain point in time, and now nobody uses them anymore. The point ultimately is that technology saves people time and it produces things more efficiently and more reliably than manual oversight does. So that's why it ends up, technological progress essentially is delegating more and more of our tasks to machines. And that's effectively what Bitcoin does. It takes out the central bank and puts that role trusted into machine. It doesn't really trust them. It just allows machines to perform the role satisfactorily to the user's advantage without exploiting the users, which is what central banking does. So the question of whether fiat works or not has to be weighed against the alternative and has to be understood in terms of the actual costs to its operation. That's what I do. So we always hear fiat people, a lot of hysterical people who are usually paid off by central banks, like most fiat hysterical people. Basically, if you're hysterical today, you're paid by a central bank one way or the other. Or you watch media that is paid by central banks one way or the other. So some of these hysterical people get hysterical about Bitcoin's energy consumption. They're always talking about the cost of Bitcoin. Well, let's run a cost-benefit analysis on fiat. Why don't we? And that's what I do in chapter 12. So when you think about the amount of wealth that fiat takes every year, so yes, it works. It allows you to buy your stupid coffee and your stupid lunch at your local supermarket. Some guy that you see every day, you have to go through the U.S. Federal Reserve, and you're happy with yourself because, hey, it works. My local neighbor, which I buy for the coffee from every day, him and I have to go through the Federal Reserve, but it works, and you're happy with yourself. Congratulations. And also, you have to lose 7% of the value of the currency every year because of the devaluation of the dilution of the stock. So you're losing 7% per year in the best cases. But you look at fiat overall, the average fiat user over the last 60 years, and we've had 60-year track record, so you can't escape that. We've had 60 years, we've seen the performance, everybody's handed in their paper, we're going to grade the exam now. 60 years is enough to pass judgment. That's a full adult life, almost. So in those 60 years, the average fiat currency or fiat overall has increased in supply by 14% per year, roughly. So that means the average fiat user has lost 50% in 5 years. So your average fiat user who had earned $100 worth of value anywhere around the world, China in 1964 or US in 1995, anytime, anywhere in the world, the average fiat user, if you earned money, you would have expected to lose 50% in 5 years. This is what has generally happened. Of course, in many places, you lost 99% in a month. But the average was 50% in 5 years. This is how much you would have lost. So this is how much we're losing. We're losing 7% per year. And effectively, at this current rate, you think about just how much the cost of inflation was at this year. This year, if we had 14% inflation, we're in a world of about $100 trillion of nominal fiat value. So if we have $100 trillion, 14% inflation, and last year we had much more than 14%. 14% is the average over this last 60 years, but we're going with the average over the 60 years just to illustrate how much it would usually be. That means 14 out of $100 trillion. Now, the entire world's wealth is around $400 trillion. So, effectively, you've taken about 3.5% of humanity's wealth to inflation every year. This is what has been the track record over the last 60 years. Every year, we sacrifice 3.5% of humanity's wealth. 3.5% of our wealth, we sacrifice it to the gods of fiat inflation. And you people think it works. That's just one cost of fiat. And wait, there is more. On top of this cost of fiat, you also have the cost of the fact that So on the one hand, they're destroying all that wealth. And then you could argue, if you were a semi-decent economist trying to make the case for fiat, you would say, well, all of that money is not really lost. All of that money goes in the hands of government. And that allows government to spend it on all kinds of wonderful things. And so that's great. But obviously, you're at least trying to make an effort to think about opportunity cost. But you're failing to recognize the idea that government doesn't spend any money on anything good. Government can't spend money on anything good. If it could spend money on anything good, anything can be done on the free market. It would have been done on the free market if people had done it freely. So that money is not going, the worst thing about the money is that it is actually being spent on the economy. If that money was transferred at once to whoever is in charge of each local central bank, if you just took that money and you transferred it to each central banker's personal bank account in Switzerland, you would do less damage to the local economy than you would by having that same person have all of that money spending it in the economy. Because what are they going to spend it on? They're going to spend it on securing the allegiance of people in the economy. They're going to spend it on propping up failed people so that they can support them. And they're just going to spread the corruption across the economy. And that's what you see basically happen all over the world. And that's what I discuss in the fiat life. So think about the cost of the fact that, not only is food becoming more expensive because our money is losing value, but also we have had this giant psyop over the last 50 years, which is this entire criminal enterprise that is the nutrition science, which has gone around telling people to eat industrial waste for 50, 60 years, causing millions, billions of early deaths, literally, because of this. This is the cost of fiat. We have the cost of the fact that we used to have an increase in energy consumption of 2% per capita per year on average over the last 160 years, basically, from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution at the beginning of the 19th century. From the beginning of I think the data is from the beginning of the 18th century. I may be misremembering this, but I think it was 2% per year from the beginning of the 18th century. And you can see the full data in the Fiat-Standard. Up until the 1970s, when this flatlines and we stop growing as much as we used to. So we could have been advancing economically so much more in terms of increasing energy consumption. We could have had the entire world have 24-hour reliable electricity probably today. Imagine your average user of your average third world fiat currency that has gone up through hyperinflation a couple of times and high inflation throughout. Imagine if your average poor person in the third world had the ability to save in a form of money that increases in value at 2% per year over the last 60 years. Imagine how many people got ruined by hyperinflation all over the world. Imagine if they all had something they could reliably use for 2%. And imagine their government didn't have all that money to launch stupid wars, to build stupid projects, to engage in stupid central planning, to do all kinds of horrific things. How much better off the world would be. I mean, everybody would have 24-hour electricity at this point. Everybody, the whole world would have gotten it. It's not rocket science building a 24-hour electricity plant. And yet, fiat world has normalized the idea that places like California, and Germany, and Texas, and Britain are supposed to start getting used to the fact that, hey, we're not going to have 24-hour reliable electricity because, we're running it on wind and solar and angel farts because science wants us to live like medieval peasants.
I like that you're so outspoken. I love it. I'm the same, actually. It's so much passion. So you think in a Bitcoin standard there would be no war? Because you said something like they finance stupid wars with the fiat money.
No, I think there would be war, but I think it's very interesting. I discussed this in the Bitcoin standard. Look at the differences in war that happened in the 17th, 16th, 18th century, 19th century to the 20th century. In fact, I have statistics on this. The 20th century was by far the bloodiest per capita. So it wasn't just that we had more people. We had a lot more people killed. 20th century, I mean, it's amazing. Apologists for fiat talk about fiat as, look, it's given us... It's given us basically beautiful Hollywood images of what we'd like to think of our world. They focus on the nice parts of the world where bad things haven't been happening. But really, the 20th century saw more genocides than anything anywhere. I mean, we've seen so many genocides, so many world wars, so much death and destruction. Nothing like anything we saw before. And and statistically we see this, it's not comparable. We see something like 170 million people killed by governments in the in the 20th century, which is an incredible number if you think about it. That was the entire planet's population up until a few hundred centuries ago was killed off by governments this century. Again, another thing to add to the cost. But think about the war under the gold standard, and we have a very interesting history on this, and I recommend that people check out Hans Hermann Hoppe, German economist, his book, Democracy, the God That Failed. Chapter 1, I think, maybe he discusses it in several other chapters, not just chapter 1, but he discusses it in chapter 1 as well, on the issue of war under the gold standard and under monarchy versus war under democracy. And under monarchies, what distinguished the situation there was that as a king, you couldn't print gold. So you had a certain amount of gold in your treasury, and you had a way of taxing people. You had a certain amount of income of taxing people, and you had to make do with that. You had these chips, and you were on the table, and you were playing away with everybody, so you had to be careful with your chips. Fiat comes along in the 20th century, and suddenly things have changed, because now also you have a money printer that allows you to make more of the money that everybody is using. So it doesn't matter how much gold you have as much, because what matters now, the limit on how much you can spend on war, is how much money everybody in your country holds. And that's really the thing. So how much money everybody in your country holds, as long as people in the money anywhere in your country have liquid wealth stored in your currency, you can keep printing more of it. You can keep devaluing it. And so you can keep fighting the war longer. That's why World War I was such an endless war. Why it dragged on for so long? Because all these central banks could just keep printing money and fighting each other. And it only ended when their currencies collapsed. They were going to kill each other forever, because the people fighting were different from the people making the decision. And that's a disconnect that is allowed by fiat. Suddenly, it didn't matter in World War I. Before World War I, this is the thing, you would have a war between two different monarchies. They would fight each other by sending their two professional armies to a professional battlefield at a certain place and time, and the two armies would fight each other, and life in both cities of both countries would continue normally, and the currency of both cities and both countries would continue to work normally. And in fact, people from both countries would continue to trade with one another normally, most cases sometimes. People in Frankfurt and Paris would trade with one another. There's nothing to stop you from taking your stuff from Frankfurt and going to Germany in many cases, to France. In many cases, the war was just an isolated thing that went on in a specific place. And because of that, it was isolating civilians. And, the result of the war was, say, somebody lost land or gained land. Life continued. Things were determined on the battlefield. But, all right, so this king lost this area. So then his people leave that area and the other people come into that area and they take it over. And life goes on. In fact, as soon as one of the two armies establishes an advantage over the other one declares surrender and gets over with it, because it's extremely expensive to fight. It's extremely expensive to build an army. And if you fight needlessly, if you sacrifice that army needlessly, all that happens is all your soldiers die, all your money runs out, and you lose. So people were far, far more careful about how they fought. And war was not total back then. I mean, under the up until the 19th century, even you look at the conflicts of the 19th century, and I have some of the statistics in the Bitcoin Standard. Some of the worst wars that went on back then, basically a week in World War I or a week in World War II. That was many decades of conflict, where really, yes, they killed a lot of people, but it was mainly contained to battlefields. And so I think there would still be war under a Bitcoin standard, but I think Bitcoin is going to make war much more expensive, much more limited, and much more contained in how it affects society. And it's going to put more it's going to force everybody to have more skin in the game of war. If you want to declare war, you have to pay for it. You either have to fight yourself or you have to pay for it. The idea of people being able to essentially, declare war by just getting somebody in charge of money to print money and finance war isn't going to be easy. And that's a major failure mode of the fiat standard. It only takes a few people in charge to print money and cause all kinds of catastrophes. And this has happened all over the world. Insane maniacs who handled the fiat money printers in the 20th century started, just any kind of megalomaniac will take over and try and settle any kind of old score they have with their neighboring country. Like think Saddam in Iran, or just the examples are endless of how often that happens. That won't happen on a Bitcoin standard. They won't have the ability to print money. They won't have the ability to force everybody in their country to subsidize this conflict again and this war. And so therefore, if they're going to fight a war, the only time they're actually going to fight a war is if they're actually finding real danger, that everybody supports them and supports their right to fight this war. Everybody's willing to give them money. You give them your Bitcoin, you give them your gold, and you join their army and you enlist in their army. And that's how you manage to have legitimate rulership as a king over a country. Or even other than a king, any kind of other form of government structure. Not necessarily, doesn't have to be monarchy, but ultimately, if there was hard money, you'd have to be legitimate with the people you're governing, because that's the only way that they're going to give you money. Because it doesn't, you won't be able to go and search everybody's house for money, which is what they used to do. Like you can't just go and search everybody's entire house for their money or for their Bitcoin in order to take all of their money. That just doesn't scale. When they had a fiat system that was centralized around the central banks, you could take everybody's wealth from the central bank, from printing money that they hold. That made it far easier. If you have to go and fight every single person and look in their house and have your soldiers get shot at by your own people, you're not going to fight a war successfully like that. So I think it's going to significantly limit human suffering as a result of war.
Okay.
But it will not get rid of war.
Yeah, okay. But anyhow, better than with fiat, I guess. So that's a good point. Now we saw, in the last couple of months, we saw the Bitcoin price declining in fiat, and the critics came out, of course, and were celebrating and said, look, it's not an inflation hedge. So why did it lately not work? Why did Bitcoin lately not work as an inflation hedge? What's your point on this?
Well, I think the problem is that people need to keep a long-term perspective on things. The problem, I mean, this is really fiat people. I had a whole thread about this on Twitter. I had this guy, David Rosenberg, who's kind of a big shot in the fiat world.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Like he was just commenting on Bitcoin, how it responded to the Russia crisis. And the problem with fiat, as I was saying earlier, because we don't have a way of saving, we don't have a way of thinking 5 years ahead. In the fiat world, you can't just put money aside and know that you're going to have this money there for you in 10 years' time. So you don't have that security. Every day you have to take your money to the fiat casino. And every day you have to stay on top of what's happening with Apple, and what's happening with Netflix, and what's happening with bonds, and what's happening with commodities, what's happening with the Japanese central bank, what's happening with the Chinese central bank, what's happening with the Russian-Ukrainian war. You have to keep knowledgeable of all of that stuff in order to make a guess about what to do with your money today and tomorrow and the week after and the week after. And there's always new things. There's always a current thing happening. There's always a new thing. And you always need to understand what to do. And it's a very, very stressful existence. I kind of feel sorry for fiat people because of this. And so for them, they live, it's like, the goldfish that is in this, in this tiny little bowl, and it just keeps, it keeps losing its focus. It looks for a while here, and then it looks again, and it just thinks that it's in a new place, but it doesn't realize it's in the same place. And this is kind of what it is with the fiat people. Like they're stuck in the same place every day where they're gambling with these fake money, essentially, every day, trying to figure out, trying to know what everybody else is going to think about the Russia thing, and what everybody else is going to think about coronavirus, and how everybody else is going to react, so that you can beat them and buy the thing that they're going to buy before they buy it. And everybody's trying to do that. Everybody's planning to play that game day to day. They don't see that, on 5 years timeline, you're not going to win them all. You're not going to guess them all. And you're not going to beat the real devaluation that's happening in the currency. But you know what's going to beat the real devaluation that's happening in the currency over a 5-year timeline? Bitcoin. Guaranteed over 5 years' time, it's going to come out ahead of the dollar, and I would say ahead of your investment portfolio. And so I would like to ask any of these, all of the people who come up and chime up at when Bitcoin is down. We've had somebody like Rubini has done it from $58. He saw Bitcoin crash to $58 in 2013, and he made a joke about it. And it's been 2012 even, and he's been making jokes about this all the way up to the time when Bitcoin has crashed to, I don't know if he's been making jokes recently, but he's been up to the tens of thousands. Well, show me your portfolio. Rubini, Taleb, Rosenberg, all of those people that keep talking about Bitcoin not beating inflation. Show me how you've beaten the inflation over the last 5 years. Give me a 5-year time horizon. Show me what you've done over the last 5 years that beats Bitcoin. 5 years, today Bitcoin is around 30,000. 5 years ago, early 2017, I'm guessing we were at, was it about 2,000 or something like that?
$2,000, yes.
Yeah, something like $2,000. So we've done a 15x in 5 years. So if you have the fiat high time preference, you can only see for the next week. You're reading the Financial Times and you're reading The Economist and you're watching CNN and you're hyperventilating and hysterical. Then yeah, it's all about this week and this weekend. And of course, there's going to be weekends along the way where Bitcoin doesn't do what you would like it to do. And then you can come and gloat about Bitcoin's bad, Bitcoin's broken. But ultimately, nobody's marketing Bitcoin as a 1-week hedge against Russia invading Ukraine. And if you're thinking of it like this, you're a fiat idiot. You're just a person who is really lost in the fiat high time preference rat race that you can't think. Nobody's saying, all right, well, in case Russia is going to invade Ukraine, buy Bitcoin and sell it the week after, and then you're going to make money. You're just gambling in that case. In the short term, the fiat price of Bitcoin is a complete crapshoot. Hold it for 5 years. Hold it for 5 years. Bitcoin's never been down on a 4-year horizon. It's basically never been down on a 3-year horizon. It's never been up less than 100% on a 4-year horizon. On a 5-year horizon, it's never been up less than 200 or 300%. It's probably been much higher. So on a 5-year horizon, ultimately, Bitcoin's fixed supply is what matters. Ultimately, all of this stuff happens. Coronavirus comes and goes. The wars get started, China bans mining, all kinds of things happen. But on a 5-year basis, the price of Bitcoin is higher than what it was. Always. Because on a 5-year timeline, Bitcoin's daily production has dropped by half at least. And the daily supply is lower. And so the ability of people to bring new coins onto the market has declined, and Bitcoin's name recognition has gone up. And ultimately it's an entrepreneurial call. And so, no, I'm not saying people should do this. And again, it is a personal decision whether you want to do this or not. But the reality is, if you're not getting into Bitcoin, you're putting your money in the fiat casino. And unless that beats Bitcoin, you're wasting your life away, basically, trying to play the fiat casino, trying to score these numbers, trying to score these points on the internet by saying, I did this and buy that and don't buy this and I know what to buy. Well, you could be doing better by holding Bitcoin. And this is the thing, like all of these hucksters do, like, scammers like Nassim Taleb. He's always full of very strong opinions about what you should do with your Bitcoin, and you shouldn't hold Bitcoin and you shouldn't do this. He'll never tell you what you should hold. Like, he'll never offer you a proper alternative. He'll never tell you what he holds. And this is the interesting thing. He says, buy olive oil. But that's not a very useful option for most people. What do people do? Realistically, for people who lived in Lebanon, he's Lebanese. I used to live in Lebanon. People in Lebanon who used Bitcoin saved their lives because they managed to use Bitcoin. They managed to continue to hold on to part of their wealth because they put part of their wealth in Bitcoin, and it appreciated significantly over the last 3 years throughout the hyperinflation. So if you offered people in Lebanon Bitcoin, that worked out very well for them. If you told them Bitcoin's bad, Bitcoin's stupid, Bitcoin's a Ponzi, Bitcoin's down, haha, you made all these idiotic fiat noises. All right, so what do? What is the alternative? How do you protect yourself from hyperinflation in a place like Lebanon? What do you suggest? They don't have any suggestions. They just want to be right. They just want to pontificate. They just want to give these opinions, and they just want to score goals. And of course, because they and the dimwits who follow them are all these kind of very high time preference people who can only think in terms of weeks. Nobody thinks to ask them, all right, so what does better do than Bitcoin over the last 5 years? Nobody asks that. I mean, I'm sure some people ask, a lot of people ask them this, but of course, he immediately blocks them on Twitter. But it is a very good question. So what do we do instead of this? So, you spend 5 years playing the market. And of course, the reality is, if you look at somebody like Taleb or somebody like Rubini, they don't tell you what to do because they don't know what to do. Because what they do is wake up every morning and play a smartass on the internet in order to sell books and basically make money that way. That's how they do their money. They don't do their money by, they don't go out there by offering actionable investment advice. They're not even like those real estate people who tell you, go put your money in a house and do this and do that and take out a loan and do this. And they actually go and do that, and they show you how they do it, and they show you the property did it. At least those guys are honest. They're showing you what they're doing. What is this guy doing? He's just being a smartass with very strong opinions about what's happening in the markets. But you're on your own. You should listen to him to feel smarter than everybody else. But then what do I do? What do I hold?
What's the alternative? Yeah.
What's the alternative? What's the point of listening to you? All right, so you're the smartest person in the world. Why am I listening? Why do you even have anything important to say if you won't tell me what to do? If you won't even show me what you did? What is your track record?
Yeah. A lot of critics say right now it's actually a risk-on asset, Bitcoin. And with the end of a quantitative easing, we will see the end of Bitcoin. Or in other words, Bitcoin was born with QE and will die with QT, with quantitative tightening. What's your take on this?
My take is I've been hearing about quantitative tightening since 2010. It's going to end now. It's going to end next week, next month, next year. And I think people who talk about quantitative tightening kind of believe the Keynesian nonsense about the idea that we can pull out this mess. We can just take the bottom row of this house of cards and the top rows will stay there because they're all stuck together, even though it's going to be hanging in the sky. No, you're pulling the cards from under the entire house of cards. You raise interest rates in any meaningful sense. I mean, think about the debt burden for municipal governments and state governments and national governments in the United States. Think about the entire U.S. government-sponsored octopus of trillions of dollars around the world. It all runs on debt. Interest rates on that go up. I mean, it's an enormous calamity. So the first point is good luck with that if you're going to do it. I think more realistically, what we're going to see is more pressing emergencies about the climate and about your health. We're going to see more and more, you see the World Economic Forum is extremely concerned about how you need to eat insects and soy, and how your car is causing the oceans to boil and the Arctic to melt, even though the Arctic isn't melting, but if you just watch enough TV, you can get it to melt in your head. So these emergencies are going to intensify, and the need for you to eat bugs and soy is going to go up, and that's going to be a far more manageable way of handling inflation than raising interest rates and exposing the bankruptcy of essentially a big chunk of the world's banking and monetary system. So, they're going to have to keep the Ponzi going, and you're going to have to eat the bugs. And you need to get rid of your big house. This idea of having a house with a yard is going to increasingly become viewed as a selfish thing that is, you're destroying the environment so that you can have a big house. And what you should do is move into a tiny little pod in the city. And that's what you're going to be able to afford to do, because, the price of houses is going to go up, and the cost of maintaining the house is going to go up because the energy is going to become too expensive. So people will move into tiny pods and they'll eat the bugs, and they'll be happy that inflation was brought down, and they'll be fine. And
That's your outlook. That's very dystopian, actually. So it's getting first worse before it gets better.
I mean, it's just the fiat world. This is what's been doing. There's no reason to expect this very strong trend that's been going on for a very
More
long
socialism,
time
more
to reverse.
more Soylent Green.
Basically, but the good thing is that, Bitcoin allows us the exit. So the question then becomes, to go back to your original answer, is whether it dies with quantitative easing. So putting that aside, I think, okay, all right, even if we will see some serious tightening, even if we will see a true reversal of monetary policy, I think, again, we'll see Bitcoin crash, maybe. We'll see a decline in the value of Bitcoin. But again, the question becomes the long-term implication. The long-term implication of it is that even a big decline today is going to bring us down to a level that's likely going to be exceeded in 5 years' time. So there will be a big crash.
I agree.
But then buying at the bottom of this crash is still likely to be better than holding on to fiat over the next 5 years. So even if there is a big giant crash in Bitcoin,
I agree with you. So what do you think?
It'll bottom at a place where it can't keep bottoming. This is the difference between Bitcoin and shitcoins. Like the shitcoins, if you look at the shitcoins, the vast majority of altcoins in the Bitcoin history, they go down and then they just continue to go down because there's a way of keeping to make more of them. And so the more you make of them, the more the price continues to go down. But Bitcoin, there's a limit on how much you can make of it. So eventually the market clears at the limit in which the new production is manageable by the market at this level. And then that new production is cut by half. Again. And then again. And then again. And then again. And so...
It's math. Yeah.
It's math. And so, yeah, maybe something like this does happen. Maybe Bitcoin does indeed crash. But, Bitcoin's already had 70-80% crashes before. So it can do it again.
It's normal. And then it's a once-in-a-life opportunity to buy more Bitcoin or Satoshis. That's it, definitely. So, but what do you think? What is the biggest threat for Bitcoin?
I think probably the biggest threat for Bitcoin, the way that I see it, would be a return to normal, healthy, gold standard monetary policy. I think. Oh, okay. Yeah, that would. Okay. When I discussed this in the last chapter of the Fiat-Standard, I think that would. What we learned. There's a wonderful book called 40 Centuries of Price Controls. And that book explains how, for 40 centuries, for 4,000 years, we have data on governments trying to fix the price of things and failing miserably. It's like watching a Benny Hill cartoon, just a comedy of errors where they go, we're going to make the bread cheaper, and then they run out of bread and they kill the king and bad things happen. And it's always the same thing. Like you can't, economically, you can't really just fix these things because you can't dictate prices, you can't dictate economic reality. And ultimately, I think the thing that you learn is that what drives markets is the behavior of human beings. And so human beings are going to want to behave in a certain way. And when governments pass laws, they don't change human incentives. They just alter them in a certain way, and then that makes people more likely to engage in behavior that compensates for that. So when you say that bread is too expensive, people will get around it, and there will be a black market for bread, and there will be ways around it. So people will find a way. The incentives will exist, and that's ultimately what I think it comes down to. That if the incentive is there for people to find an economic good, then the producer will make it and the consumer will buy it, and the thing will continue to operate. If the incentive is taken, then that's how it's gone. So the way that typewriters were fought was not through somebody banning typewriting. It wasn't through the pencil industry or the pen industry lobbying to ban typewriters. The way that typewriters went out of business is that computers and printers came about. So that was a much better way of doing things. So I think, perhaps the best chance to stop Bitcoin would be governments offering people the existing banks. The existing banking system has got an enormous amount of money already on it, an enormous amount of value. It's got billions of people worldwide already on it. If you peg that to a gold backing, all you have to do is just peg the dollar to gold, and then everything else is automatically pegged to gold. The price of the gold is likely going to go up significantly. So you do $20,000 gold, and then you can peg the entire world to gold. And gold bugs will be very happy, and they'll laugh. And they'll have the last laugh. And I think if you do something like this, the world economy now runs on gold. You go back to a gold standard. Obviously, I think you will take away the threat of inflation. And you will likely drive a lot of demand away from Bitcoin. And I think the other implication of it is that since you're taking away the inflation because you're putting governments on gold, governments are going to be far friendlier and nicer and less angry and violent. And therefore, people will have less of a reason to get around them. We'll have a gold-based digital banking system that people can use reliably, hypothetically speaking. So there's going to be less censorship. There's going to be less drama. Think about the US in the 19th century and Europe in the 19th century. There was no war on drugs. People didn't get arrested for drugs in the same way. You didn't have this kind of, drugs were around and they weren't very popular and they weren't looked at positively. But there was no war on drugs in the same way that you see today. And there was no police state. There was no nanny state. You can't finance all of that nonsense. And that's what creates most of the people that are angry at the government. So take all of that away. And of course, that is a very, 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 very big if. I'm not saying that's going to happen. But take all of that away. And you take away a significant amount of the demand for Bitcoin. So I think that would be the best chance to deliver a knockout blow. I don't think it would work, but because I still think in the long run, Bitcoin will go back to appreciating, so even if it drops. But this would be like the only thing that would deliver a knockout blow to the demand for Bitcoin. So like if they go and they make quantitative tightening, do you think the average Bitcoiner is going to decide, all right, yep, time to go back to the euro? All right, time to go back to the Lebanese lira. All right, they're tightening it. Now they're going to tighten the supply rate and they're going to tighten the interest rates. Now I can put my money back in the bank. I'm going to get rid of this digital beanie thing. I can't see it happening after quantitative tightening, but I think with gold, it'll happen a little bit more. And I think it would undermine demand. So I think that would be my guess for the best shot if you really, really, really wanted to kill Bitcoin. You just need to destroy the 20th century, basically. And good luck. So, like, either way, I'm happy. I will, Bitcoin dies, and the cost of Bitcoin dying is that we get rid of fiat and we go back to a gold standard. I'll call it a draw. I'm happy.
So Peter Schiff would be happy. Perhaps this is his plan, or this is his vision for the future, and he knows it already. But anyhow, so what do you think? When will fiat die? We will see it in a year, in this decade, in 20 years?
I think, I don't know, one thesis that I try and present in the Bitcoin standard and in the fiat standard. So the point of fiat is, after studying the Bitcoin standard and then after studying fiat, how will those two things interact? And that's the point of the final chapter. And one point that I try and make is that fiat doesn't have to die and Bitcoin doesn't have to kill fiat. And in fact, or at least not for a very long time. And in fact, it doesn't have to cause a hyperinflationary collapse. I think this is really the key thing. I make the argument against the hyperinflationary collapse of fiat currencies. First of all, fiat hyperinflation can happen. So just like it happened in Zimbabwe or in Lebanon, it can happen anywhere. But if it's going to happen, it's going to happen because the central bank is going to go crazy. It's not going to happen because of Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I think, is an anti-hyperinflationary force. In fact, it's slightly disinflationary in that what Bitcoin allows, since the key point of the book might be that fiat mining is credit issuance. What happens is that it used to be before that gold miners would dig up gold and sell it on the gold market to gold savers who would buy that gold and hold it as saving. That's how we got savings. And then with government money, we moved to a system of saving where governments dig up credit liabilities and hand them out to people, and people use them as savings. So what do people use in their saving portfolio? They use government bonds, which is essentially government debt. That's like considered the safest thing in your portfolio. Instead of holding gold, as people used to in the 19th century, today people hold government bonds. So government bonds then effectively allow the government to print money because you're making new credit. So we've moved to this kind of technology that needs more credit to be generated in order for people to use as saving. And now we're getting to a problem where we can't generate enough credit for people to use as a store of value. And so we have people storing their wealth in all kinds of bubbles all over the world. We have a housing bubble, we have a stock bubble, we have a bond bubble, we have a bubble in everything. And everything is, because people are using everything as a store of value. People are trying to hold their wealth in something and they're hoping that they are getting in ahead of the bubble and that when this thing crashes, they don't lose. And so you have all these bubbles that are inflated. Well, Bitcoin is the way out because Bitcoin is the one bubble that doesn't pop because everything else pops. So if you invest in Bitcoin, there's no mechanism of making more Bitcoin that's going to bring the price down. If you invest in real estate, if you invest in bonds, if you invest in any other kind of fiat debt-based asset, any asset that's based on bonds, any asset that's based on debt, more debt can be issued, and therefore the price of the asset can come crashing down. So it's never a very good store of savings. It keeps going up and then keeps crashing, and then the central bank needs to print more money in order to save it. And so it's a pretty bad way. But now what's happening is that people are realizing, well, I don't need to hold bonds, like the Michael Saylor strategy. The idea that if corporate America realizes, I don't want to hold bonds, I want to hold Bitcoin, well, then what happens? Well, then the creation of credit declines. If people decide, I don't want to borrow to buy a mortgage, to buy a house, because I'm just going to hold Bitcoin and then I'm going to save up for a house and then I'm just going to buy the house with cash, less credit is created. So growth in Bitcoin brings back a saving economy, allows people to save, and allows demand for savings to go out from the fiat economy, leading to less fiat creation. And that's the point that most people miss. It's not just that Bitcoin will eat demand for holding dollars. That is true to an extent, but most people don't hold dollars. The reason there's a lot of dollars out there is because a lot of people hold a small amount of dollars, but very few people hold large amounts of dollars. The majority of real wealth in dollars is held in the form of debt on interest-bearing instruments or equity later on, another kind of investment. But the majority of saving wealth is held in the form of debt. So Bitcoin allows us to not monetize that, to get away from having to monetize this, not have to monetize debt, and instead we allow us to monetize a hard asset, which people will save, which people can use. And so as more people do this, that leads to less creation of credit. So it's a seamless, natural kind of fiat, it's a seamless, natural market way of sidestepping the fiat system by building a robust alternative next to it that just allows anybody to upgrade to it at any point in time. If the fiat system is failing you for whatever reason, you can upgrade to it. And as you move to Bitcoin, you stop creating. All right, so you get rid of your, say, dollar saving account, which for most people is nothing. Most people don't keep money in their saving account. They don't keep money in their checking account. They keep a few $1,000s, if for maybe if even rich people will only have a small amount of physical cash that they hold, because they prefer to hold other better kinds of instruments. So yes, you'll get rid of, maybe you'll hold a little bit less cash, although even that might remain. You'll still hold the same amount of cash, but instead of holding, so this is the way to think about it. You're gonna give up fewer dollars in your checking and saving account than you're going to give up in dollar-denominated debt-based instruments. In other words, a lot more bonds and a lot more credit instruments and a lot more investments in fiat than you give up in your checking account. So the impact is that that's going to lead to a reduction in the creation of fiat, as well as a reduction in the supply of fiat, but a largely larger reduction in the creation of fiat. So that's why I think it could be disinflationary. Bitcoin can protect fiat from hyperinflation And so it'll reduce the supply of fiat and stop the growth in fiat. And as its value dwindles and declines next to Bitcoin, Bitcoin increases in value and the Bitcoin economy becomes bigger. And so
Do you think mass adoption is increasing in this time?
I think so. I think this happens as mass adoption happens. And the thing about Bitcoin is, mass adoption happens in two ways: in enriching existing Bitcoiners and in more Bitcoiners coming in. So because the supply is limited, so existing Bitcoiners, if they hold, the value goes up. So even if not a lot of people come in, the value goes up while the value of fiat is going down. So the fiat economy is getting poorer and fiat people are having to eat bugs and soy and live in pods, whereas number go up in Bitcoin. So naturally, Bitcoin is becoming a bigger part of the economy, whether it's because of more people or just because more wealth is stored in Bitcoin. It holds on to its wealth better. This is really why it wins. It's just better technology for wealth, better technology for money. So it holds on to its wealth better than fiat. And so over time, it increases. So over time, the value of the Bitcoin economy is going to be larger than the fiat economy, I think. And I think this trend will continue until the Bitcoin is 10 times larger than fiat and then 100 times larger than fiat. But we could get to a point where Bitcoin is 100 times larger than fiat and fiat doesn't have a hyperinflationary recession. It doesn't have a hyperinflationary collapse. That's what I'm trying to get at. So fiat continues to increase to 7% per year. Numbers continue to go up. People become billionaires and trillionaires and everybody's a trillionaire. And, they redenominate $1 million will become $1 and we start all over again. But the value of the dollars going to dwindle over time, not necessarily collapse, because I think Bitcoin can prevent the credit creation. That's the key thing. More and more people will copy Sailor in that regard.
Yeah. So what do you think? Which countries will accept Bitcoin as a currency next?
I don't know. I definitely didn't get El Salvador, and I definitely didn't guess Central African Republic. So I'm definitely not.
But a little more to come. You think so?
Yeah. Eventually, there's going to just be more, and keep guessing. Eventually, I'm going to get it right, even if it's the last country. I'll be able to guess that one 100% at least. Eventually, so might as well start taking a guess. I don't know.
Yeah, we will see.
I would imagine another Latin American. I mean, this is just again another limited imagination that can only see forward what is from back. But I guess another Latin American or African country that has a horrific international currency that doesn't have its own central bank. I think it's just much easier for a country that doesn't have its own currency to do it because they don't have a central bank. Might as well just go to Bitcoin.
Yeah. We will see. Exciting times, definitely. I would like to wrap up with some rapid fire questions. You can give me short answers because this interview was already mind-blowing, I think, and the people will love it. If you like it, guys, please thumbs up, share it with your best friends or with your Bitcoin-hating colleagues at work, and subscribe, of course, and check out the book. It's definitely worth reading, The Fiat-Standard from Saifedean. So first, rapid fire question, Bitcoin.
Fixes everything.
Gold.
Old.
Ethereum.
Scam.
Luna.
Scam.
Meat.
Food.
Beyond meat.
Shit.
Scam. Also Ponzi. Shitcoin.
Yeah.
And then vegetarians.
Well-meaning, but unfortunately misguided.
Okay. Religion.
I prefer not to. I don't know.
You don't want to answer?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, got it. Then you've got a favorite country?
I always used to really like Switzerland. Every time I went there, Switzerland, I would say my idea of what a Bitcoin standard would look like is based on what I understood about Switzerland from studying Swiss monetary history And the fact that they were the last country on the gold standard, they were effectively on the gold standard up until the 1970s. And so if you want to see what the difference is between a gold standard and the rest of the world, think of Switzerland in the 1970s versus the world today. You know, today is late stage fiat. Switzerland in the 1970s was late stage gold standard. Zero unemployment, zero inflation, richest place in the world.
True.
Just an absolutely amazing country. And I've visited many times, and I really love just, you can see how the fact that the country has witnessed so many centuries of peace and prosperity and sound money is just, you can see how it reflects in the fact that people are so much more productive. Like, people are just so productive. And the other striking thing is how capital has accumulated over hundreds of years there. You see bridges that are very old, buildings that are very old, and it's just been accumulating, and it's just, the same families, the same businesses that have been there for hundreds of years have just been growing. Every generation makes it bigger. Every generation makes it better. This is what peace, civilization, this is what peace and sound money allows. This is really it. And that was why I used to love to go to Switzerland. But now, unfortunately, it's becoming, now the Swiss franc is a shitcoin like all the other currencies. And so Switzerland is becoming more
I've got a lot
fiat.
of audience from Switzerland, so I'm sure the Fiat-Standard will be now in the best-selling ranks with this statement, because they will love it. But yeah, I know what you mean. I think the same, and it's a pity actually that the Swiss National Central Bank actually became such a hedge fund and bought like FANG stocks and everything else. They should buy some Bitcoin. That's my advice. It's what I advised in my book actually for the Deutsche Bundesbank as well. But we will see. So the last question is something totally different. It has nothing to do with Bitcoin or fiat systems or the whole scam. What's the meaning of life for Saifedean Ammous?
The meaning of life? Well, that's a big question.
Bitcoin.
So life is made up of a giant mass of organisms that eat each other. So those are living organisms. They're always eating each other. So living things are always eating living things, and they reproduce. Yeah. And I think this is almost extremely simplistic, but I view it as extremely profound. And it's just, this is what life is about. Living organisms are organisms that eat living things. They excrete as well, and they want to get rid of the excretion. They want to get away from it. They want to eat away from their excretion, and they want to reproduce. That's ultimately what all living things do. And I think humans are no different. We are ultimately living things, and understanding and accepting this aspect of life, I think, is extremely helpful in managing your life. What you view as urges that are inside you is just life. Life wants you to eat. Life wants you to reproduce. And so I think thinking about it this way helped me realize that, starting a family is a very important thing. I got married to have a family. And I think that's a very important part of life. Life in a material sense, it's about, you need to eat and you need to live in a way that allows you. It's almost funny, but I think it's true. It's just to be away from your shit. As an organism, you want to eat and be away from your shit. But as a human being, it takes on more meanings that you want to be able to afford to live in a way where, you're settled in one place and you have your place, but also that place is clean and you're able to get rid of your shit as well as other people's shit. So essentially, financially and materially, you need to build yourself a life that is clean and organized, and you're able to access food, and you're able to live in a way that is healthy and clean. And that's essentially the material aspect of life, which is less important. But I think the more important aspect is that you have this life inside you, and you were born because this life flowed through people before you, and inside you there is a desire to pass it on to others. And I think you can resist it, you can fight it, you can delay it, but I think I think the long run track record shows that people who submit to it and accept it and live with it tend to generally be happier and tend to feel more rewarded. And I think that makes sense. It's just what life wants us to be. It's what your body's there for. It's just the force that wants there. So you live your life thinking about those things, the basics of material existence, in order to secure the ability to pass on life to newer generations. And where my economic thinking comes in is that really the meaning of this, the meaning of life in the most important sense is to be able to give your children a better life than the one that you had? How are you able to provide them with a life better than the one that your father gave you? And this is something that my father used to teach me since I was a very young little child. Yeah. And I think it's just it's an extremely important way of thinking of it. Yeah, you may argue with it, you may not like it, but ultimately, this is what we as human beings do. We come into this life and we want to reproduce and we want to give our children a better life. And I think recognizing it and understanding it and working towards it is going to make you a lot happier and more secure than trying to fight it and resist it and argue with it.
Yeah.
Just like Bitcoin. Just like Bitcoin.
Yeah. Definitely. Saifedean, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your books, of course. And it was outstanding. I enjoyed every second. And it took longer than I thought, but it was worth every minute. And I will put all the links from your website and, of course, your Twitter account in the show notes. And I hope to speak to you soon. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you so much for having me. I had a good time.
Na, habe ich euch zu viel versprochen? Es ist wirklich ein brillantes und tiefgreifendes Gespräch mit ihm gewesen und man hat Saifedean auf einer ganz anderen neuen Seite kennengelernt. Beide Bücher, wie gesagt, sind absolut lesenswert. Wer das Geldsystem, wer Bitcoin verstehen möchte, wer erkennen möchte, in was für einem Betrugssystem wir leben, dem kann ich die Bücher nur ans Herz legen. Die Links findet ihr unter dem Video in der Beschreibung. Bevor ich jetzt zur Zusammenfassung komme, würde mich natürlich dein Feedback zum Gespräch interessieren. Wie hat es dir gefallen? Mit welchen Positionen bist du d'accord oder welche Positionen, welche Punkte siehst du komplett anders? Zudem natürlich, wenn euch das Video gefällt, lasst ein Abo da, Daumen nach oben und teilt es kräftig mit Leuten, die Bitcoin noch nicht kennen, nicht mögen, schon mögen oder kennenlernen wollen. Was war das Learning in dem Video, in dem Gespräch mit Saifedean? Natürlich erstmal haben wir gelernt, wie er überhaupt auf Bitcoin gekommen ist und wie fast jeder, so wie auch ich, hat er erstmal Bitcoin nicht erkannt als das, was es ist, als die größte Revolution aller Zeiten, als eine geniale Lösung zu unserem Ponzi-Betrugs-Fiat-Geldsystem. Er erklärt auch, was Geld ist, dass Geld ein Tauschmittel ist, dass Geld relevant ist und Geld muss eigentlich hart sein. Und das härteste Geld der Welt ist seiner Ansicht nach nicht mehr Gold, sondern momentan Bitcoin. Spannend fand ich auch die Erklärung, warum so viele Ökonomen, warum so viele Menschen aus dem System Bitcoin so hart angreifen, so stark bekämpfen, weil sie natürlich vom jetzigen System abhängig sind und auch von diesem System bezahlt werden in der Währung des Betrugssystems. Und natürlich sieht keiner auf dem Ast, auf dem er sitzt. Das ist natürlich verständlich. Schön fand ich auch die Erklärung, Unterschied zwischen Bitcoin und Gold und warum Bitcoin eigentlich beim nächsten Halving, also bei der nächsten Reduktion des Block Rewards, der Belohnung für das Finden eines Blockes, dann noch wertvoller, noch seltener wird als Gold. Interessant war auch natürlich, dass wir in den letzten 60 Jahren pro Jahr eigentlich eine reale Inflation von 7% hatten. Das durch das stetige Gelddrucken, durch die Geldmengenausweitung, durch diesen Wachstumswahnsinn oder Zwang im System, eine Art Selbstzerstörungsmechanismus im jetzigen Fiat-Betrugssystem schon eingenistet, implementiert ist. Und durch diesen Wachstumswahn, nicht nur, dass das BIP wachsen muss, sondern auch die Geldmenge wachsen muss, dass immer mehr Kredite vergeben werden müssen, um das ganze Karussell am Laufen zu halten, sind wir alle versklavt, sind wir alle im Hamsterrad, weil wir immer mehr arbeiten müssen und die Kaufkraft uns gestohlen wird durch den Kaufkraftverlust durch die Inflation. Brillant fand ich auch die Aussage, als ich ihn gefragt habe, was ist die größte Bedrohung von Bitcoin? Und er gesagt hat, der Goldstandard. Weil im Goldstandard sind die Nationen eigentlich immer reicher geworden. Er zeigt auf, dass wir bis 1971, bis zum Ende des Goldfensters durch Richard Nixon, damals wurde ja die Goldbindung an den US-Dollar aufgehoben, die Menschheit eigentlich immer wohlhabender geworden ist. Und erst seit 1971 leben wir in dieser Betrugswelt, leben wir in dieser Kreditschöpfung, in dieser Fiat-Kreditschöpfung, im Fiat-Geldsystem. Auch dazu habe ich Videos gemacht. Schaut gerne mal in die Playlist rein, zum Beispiel in diesem Video hier, wie unser Geldsystem überhaupt funktioniert, wie Geld entsteht, wie Geld in die Welt kommt. Und dass wir seitdem überall sozusagen in einem Betrugssystem leben. Egal ob in Pharma, ob in der Politik, beim Essen. Das fand ich auch spannend, ja, dass wir immer fetter werden, immer abhängiger werden, immer kränker werden und dann auf Fiat-Medikamente zurückzugreifen in einer Fiat-Kunstwelt. Und dass wir eigentlich nicht nur in der Matrix leben, sondern in einem riesen Betrugssystem. Und dass aus dem Grund seit 1971, seit Abschaffung des Goldstandards, die Lebensqualität, der Wohlstand immer weiter gesunken ist. Und das sehen wir überall, sagt er. Und das sehe ich teilweise natürlich auch so, an der Qualität unserer Lebensmittel, an der Qualität der Gesellschaft, an der Qualität der Medien und so weiter. Und dass im Endeffekt dieses Fiat-Geldsystem Menschenleben kostet. Und natürlich, was ich auch schon immer wieder anprangere, dass unser jetziges Fiat-Geldsystem die Verschwendung anführt, weil wir stetig wachsen müssen. Eine weitere Behauptung von ihm ist auch, dass wir mit Bitcoin weniger Kriege hätten und damit auch weniger Menschen, die umkommen würden. Zudem sagt er, das Endziel von Fiat ist eigentlich, dass wir wieder zurück ins Mittelalter katapultiert werden. Und dass Fiat irgendwann dann zu Verschuldung führt, dann zu Sozialismus, zu Planwirtschaft, Preisdiktate, und die haben noch nie funktioniert, genauso wenig wie Sozialismus. Da gibt es das schöne Zitat von Hayek, nämlich, würden Sozialisten verstehen, wie das Geld funktioniert, wären sie keine Sozialisten. Dem kann ich nur zustimmen. Und natürlich, was auch für viele wichtig ist, dass Bitcoin langfristig definitiv die Inflation schlagen wird. Auf Sicht von 5 Jahren wird Bitcoin den Dollar schlagen, die Inflation schlagen und wahrscheinlich auch alle anderen Assets schlagen. Und da stimme ich mit ihm natürlich auch überein. Bitcoin wird meiner Ansicht nach sechsstellig. Kurzfristig, wisst ihr, ich erwarte noch Kurse unter 20.000 Dollar in Fiat. Und natürlich langfristig, wer einen langfristigen Horizont hat, wer jetzt auf Weltreise geht oder sagt, hey, komm, in 5 Jahren guck ich wieder auf den Preis, der kann auch jetzt kaufen. Der ist es im Rückspiegel der Geschichte, ob ich bei 22, 25 oder 18.000 Dollar gekauft habe. Aber ich glaube, zwischen 10.000 und 20.000 Euro beziehungsweise Dollar ist ja fast das gleiche momentan, ist eine gute Kaufzone, und vielleicht geht es sogar tiefer, vielleicht geht es auch sogar unter die 10.000 Dollar. Aber wichtig ist immer, nicht auf Kredit spekulieren, nicht alle Eier in einen Korb legen. Da bin ich ein bisschen diversifizierter aufgestellt als Saifedean. Ich bin zwar ein Riesenfan, ein Befürworter von Bitcoin und glaube auch, dass es das Best Performance der Asset wird, aber wie gesagt, man muss immer mit Wahrscheinlichkeiten rechnen, und wir sehen ja, wie unplanbar die Welt geworden ist, und das ist ja genau dieses Fourth Turning, diese Zeitenwende, in der wir uns befinden, und ein altes Geldsystem stirbt, ein neues Geldsystem kommt, und es geht immer einher mit großen Verwerfungen, und wir werden in den nächsten Jahren einen wilden Ritt haben. Es wird uns wirklich die Kinnlade runterfallen bei all diesen Ereignissen, die passieren werden. Wir werden jetzt in wenigen Jahren komprimiert große Veränderungen erleben. Ich freue mich auf dein Feedback zu Saifedean, zum Interview. Ich freue mich natürlich über euer Engagement hier im Kanal, wenn ihr das Video weiterempfehlt, wenn ihr den Kanal weiterempfehlt, und wir werden immer mehr, wir sind jetzt schon 284.000 aufgeweckte Seelen, was mich freut, was mich ehrt, und immer wieder werde ich auf der Straße angesprochen, werde umarmt, bekomme irgendwelche Dankes-E-Mails oder Briefe. Das freut mich, das ehrt mich, und das motiviert mich auch weiterzumachen. Und denkt immer daran, wegen Menschen wie Saifedean, der ganz klar einen ganz konkreten Standpunkt mit Rückgrat vertritt, ist die Welt da draußen besser, als wenn wir glauben. Herzlichst, euer Marc.